ago. Almost impossible to do in a non-automated environment because nobody's going to keep track of when you finish that training and send an email to the right person, and maybe your manager changed in the interim, so maybe I'm your new manager. But in a system, the system can track the data. It's very simple, and this is where you get a nice blend of technology and the human element, because the technology is making sure that the right manager is getting the assessment 3 months later. But on the human side, it's just a simple assessment. It's the guy a better manager? Yes or, comments please. Yes, no, comment. So it becomes much more useful data, and that is an easy way of tracking things. When you start talking about the justification of why I spent money on training, you get into some very dangerous ground. And yes, you could spend hours talking about it, and there's lots of controversy about whether or not that data is even accurate.
Absolutely.
So I have a, sorry. So I have a question which,
Thanks.
So I have a question which goes back to one of the points, Adam, that you mentioned on the development side. The key point you mentioned is transparency. It came up both from the development as well as from the performance management point of view. But what's your experience in terms of how does one have transparency in a performance and rewards process that you would have seen? Because we all know the dreaded bell curve or bell curve or whatever you want to call that, which to my mind and my experience is more as the antagonism towards that is more out of a lack of transparency than the actual philosophy per se. But both your and Vivek's views would kind of help.
Yeah, so I would say most companies have to make decisions about 3 different kinds of transparency. So the first one's easy, that every company should do, which is transparency about literally training and development opportunities. So to the extent the employee knows that the company cares about their ongoing career development and is able to offer useful content to them and is willing to invest in the employee just feels better about the organization. So that one is easy to do and probably applies to all corporations. The second one is in the performance area, and here I would bifurcate transparency around how somebody's getting paid, which not enough companies do, and this idea of pay for performance, which is very important, but most companies don't do it because there can be a human element here. So I agree, we have clients that go crazy. They have a 100-point scale with 2 decimal places. So you want to talk about crazy definitions of where people belong, but where this becomes useful is dealing with outliers. It's not useful in getting 100% accuracy. That becomes useless, actually, as Vivek was saying. But it becomes useful when you have a manager who is trying to reward their friend who's actually a bad performer, right? So it prevents abuse of the system. So it puts, I like to say, it puts guardrails on compensation, allowing a manager flexibility, but not so much flexibility that they start to be unfair or unethical. And so it allows you to have some control over the process. That's really important kind of transparency, where somebody understands, I did good work and so I got rewarded for it, or my work was bad and I did not get rewarded for it, and having clear transparency about that. Now, transparency about where somebody fits on a 9-box grid or in a calibration session when people are being stack ranked, personally, I think is not useful and only creates an adversarial relationship. And in fact, there's a trend now in North America that, to be honest, is much more bark than bite. So people talk about it all the time, but almost nobody uses it, which is the idea of eliminating performance ratings entirely. So performance becomes more of a development discussion. There is no rating. It's about the employee and the manager having a transparent discussion about challenges and opportunities and strengths and weaknesses. Most companies don't do that. And I would say there are still too many that are doing the top grading and the forced ranking, and that works well in years 1 and 2 and starts to lead to big problems in years 3 to 5. So transparency on pay for performance, I think, is great. Transparency around forced rating is dangerous. And then the third area is around succession, so mobility. And so a company may or may not have transparency, and in particular, not the HR team, but the manager may or may not have transparency about the employee's interests, because maybe the employee's interest is to take the manager's job, or to move to a different department, which might not be viewed positively by the manager. And similarly, the employee often does not know where they stand in the succession world, because it leads potentially to adverse impact. So I tell you that you're on my succession plan, I expect to retire in 18 months, I think you're ready to advance in 12 months or 18 months, and so now I've put in your mind that you're getting my job in 18 months. And maybe 18 months from now, to Vivek's point, the needs of the business is transformed dramatically, and so the competencies that are needed for my position, I'm not even qualified for anymore. I'm retiring, but the person to replace me needs to be somebody completely different. And you're no longer the right candidate. That has very adverse impacts and often leads to massive retention risk. So we generally advise companies to be very cautious about how much transparency they have on succession with the employee. So you want the employee to know they've been viewed as high potential. Obviously, if you have executive programs, you want the employee nominated and put into the program, but you don't necessarily want to say, Mr. Employee, we think you're ready to advance in 12 months, so that 11 months from now, I want to know where's my raise and my promotion, and if I don't get it, I'm going to leave. So those are really the three areas of transparency.
Well, on transparency, I don't think I can have any dispute with transparency. Transparency is a must. But how we communicate, I think, becomes far more important. For example, we can talk about, say, compensation and benefit. We communicate to them saying that if everything goes right, this is the likely salary increase that you might get, rather than giving a definitive answer. You gave a very good example of succession planning. You are one of the three candidates. You are a possible successor, but not necessarily so. It all depends on situation at that point of time. Hence, 18 months, that position itself may not exist. Forget change of, because it's a dynamic world. But fact that you are identified as a potential successor tells you that we value you. You are important to us, and we are looking at you intently for company's future. I think we got to be very careful about how we communicate that transparency. Transparency is important, but method of communication, I think it's far more important. Talking of performance management, well, I think bell curves got overstated. It is important to have performance management program. It is important to differentiate top performers from bad performers. It's important to have a differential reward program in the corporation. But to insist on bell curves and to insist on having a accurate, 100% right, non-subjective performance management, I think is unacceptable to me. Let's accept some realities. We are all human beings. And as human beings, we have our own biases, we have our own stereotypes, we have our own limitations in terms of even setting right objectives and right goals to begin with. So to say that I'm going to have a 100% objective, perfect performance management system itself is wrong. So in fact, I like to always communicate to the people that we make an endeavor to be as objective as possible. But we cannot guarantee objectivity. You are being very honest, and you are being very transparent about that. My intentions are right, but my methods could be wrong. And my methods will keep improving with the passage of time and with the experience that I'll gain. And you are quite happy, I will be very delighted if you could contribute to improving our methods. I think it has to be transparent, but in this kind of fashion. When it comes to point, whether it's a 5-point scale or a 3-point scale or a 100-point scale, I think these scales have been created by managers because they want to run away from giving honest feedback. According to me, there are only 3 types of people. Those who perform, those who don't perform or those who exceed performance. Only three kinds of people. At the end of that year, I need to be told my boss that Vivek, you are happy, you are a great employee, you are exceeding all my expectations, I am delighted that you are part of my team. Rather than saying your rating is 3.6. Because that quantitative rating has zero value to me. What is valuable to me is how am I performing, what are my areas for improvement, how is my boss looking at me, and so on and so forth. The whole objective of performance management is developmental in nature, as well as it's for the alignment of the people, and I think somewhere you have forgotten that. The performance management is designed to align people to the corporate objectives. And that part is completely ignored and forgotten. That's my big concern. And also another objective is development. We have focused so much on rewards, we don't realize that, look at it, when I started my career 40 years back, we rewarded people for tenure and seniority. Then we started talking in terms of rewarding people for performance. Today, we are talking of rewarding people for not only the performance, but also the skills and capabilities that they possess. For the creativity means failure. Because you can't be creative always 100%, right? So we got to have tolerance for failure. So entire performance management systems needs a fantastic, very deep review. And we got to be having a very open, transparent, clear communication with people and set their expectations right. Transparency is all for setting expectations right. Most of the problems come up because expectations and realities have a big gap. But the moment I minimize that gap, by being honest about it, things become much easier. People appreciate your honesty.
So just one point over there. I think in one particular year when we had an engagement study, people's satisfaction on compensation and on performance management was as low as 34%. And then when we took on a journey to become a great place to work, within about 15 months, that same score moved up to 77%. I think one of the critical factors which work for us as an organization is how transparent you are in communicating that what goes into your performance evaluation, what also goes into your CNB studies, meaning how your roles get mapped and compared with other roles, and it can go even at a grassroots level whether you map the roles rightly or not with the peers, because at times the titles are different, the grades are different, and HR might make a mistake even in that simple process, and then it's how you communicate, how your compensation gets derived, how your STI or bonus gets derived, how certain people get long-term compensation while the majority never gets it, how some people get ESOPs while others don't get it. So there's a whole work around that. But coming back to the question point, I had a question for Vivek, and Vivek, you've been advisor to MDA, you're also on the board of Motilal. In a corporate world, there's so much that we discuss on employee engagement, people development, use of technology, and it does get a approval because in multinational organizations these are the in thing. Basis your experience, how do you see the mindsets of promoters of family organizations towards these concepts and towards investments in these aspects, and how are they different from HR? Because what becomes most challenging to influence a promoter or a family office to invest in these initiatives, and as a CHRO, what works effectively?
Well, entrepreneurs are far more committed to technology than you would assume. And why does an entrepreneur likes fantastic systems, processes, and technology? Because that's the way he manages a large corporation. It's part of control system for him. The reasons could be different.
Absolutely.
Look at any Indian entrepreneur, Parta system, in the evening trial balance must be ready. Now that can happen only if it is technology enabled. I'm having offices in 700 cities and 16 manufacturing plants, and the only way my parta or my trial balance will be complete and perfect at the end of the day is through technology. So entrepreneur invests humongous amount of money and energy in systems, processes, because that's the only way he can even manage a large corporation. So you will be surprised. A large number of these progressive or successful Indian enterprises have invested more in technology than many multinationals have. In fact, the largest client of SAP in Asia is Reliance, for your information. The largest client of Microsoft in Asia is Reliance, for your information. Primarily because of the need to manage and control in a systematic manner, in a consistent manner across. That's an entrepreneurial need.
So which are the areas where the investment doesn't come in? Is it people development?
So, can I
If investments are not coming in people development, the company wouldn't be growing at the
But I'm not
fastest
talking about
pace.
Reliance in general.
In general, they do a lot of investment. I work with Motilal Oswal as a everything is automated completely. Everything is process driven, because you can't have millions of customers who are your share brokers without a phenomenal automated platforms. So there's a huge investment that's happening there. There's a huge investment happening in people development, because that's the only way they can manage. So it's an assumption that you're making, that Indian enterprises don't invest in that. If you look at any Indian enterprise which is successful, has far better investments than many other
So if I can just pick up another theme, and Adam, back at you, and then I'll let Prashant, you've been trying to ask a question for a while now. So what's the role of technology in shaping the employee organization conversation? And India is clearly leapfrogging into the mobile generation. More mobile connections are being added than most of us can handle at one level. Organizations are also power systems. So there is a power dynamic that's always playing out between the organization and the employee, and this entire social mobile world, or the combination of these two, is rapidly shifting the power dynamic within the organization, and most of us are scrambling to figure out how to deal with this dynamic. So your thoughts, and then Prashant, for your question.
So it's actually fairly straightforward. If you think about anybody growing up in the wired generation, right, the mobile generation that's coming into the workforce now, they get constant feedback, right? We might not understand Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram and all the other tools that are being used, but the feedback they're getting when they do their homework, when they go to a party, when they go on vacation is instantaneous. And so they're coming into the workforce expecting continuous feedback, constant feedback. And we are generally set up to give annual feedback. If we're really progressive, we give quarterly feedback. They are used to continuous feedback. This is very difficult for people to understand. So we did a survey about 6 months ago asking people, where are they getting their mentorship from? Where are they getting useful feedback from? Now the assumption, of course, is from their manager. That was not the case. About 30% of people said they got their useful feedback from their manager. 70% said they got the useful feedback from their peers, from other people in the organization. So technology becomes an enabler of this. So this idea of continuous feedback,